PragerU is back making claims about history, psychology, and theology, all for the purpose of defending the Bible. This time around, Dennis Prager makes a case for why the biblical God is and should be represented as male, so I thought it'd be appropriate for a certain friend of mine to help me out with this response. Dr. Hector Garcia is a psychologist who wrote the book on why the Abrahamic God is male. Dr. Garcia is a clinician and evolutionary psychologist who's written works within the field of evolutionary psychology, such as Sex, Power, and Partisanship, and Alpha God, which we'll be discussing a good bit here. Doc, go ahead and take it away for us.
Thanks, Drew. As you'll see shortly, I don't disagree that the biblical God is represented as male. I disagree with Prager on why that is. So as Drew guides us through this video, I'll chime in whenever I can to show how evolutionary psychology explains the biblical God better than Prager does.
One of the criticisms many people make against the Bible is that it depicts God in male terms. The most obvious example is God is referred to as he. Why did the Bible do this? Well, here's the answer. Because the Bible is preoccupied with making a kinder, less violent, more just world.
It's funny how reading the Bible from a theological perspective predicated on devotion gives you a very different take than studying it academically.
If we lean away from theology and apply the scrutiny of science, history, and current affairs on Prager's claims, we see that they couldn't be more misleading. First, nations in which masculine gods hold the largest place in society are typically the most violent and the most oppressive, and the level of that god's purported masculinity is associated with how violent and oppressive those societies are. ISIS, after all, worships a highly masculine god. Let's take a moment to explore why. The Bible was written by warlords of the biblical era. In that era, where the masculine God of the Bible held his most central role in daily life, was so incredibly violent that, let's just say, I would not want to have lived there. The only thing keeping one tribe from hacking the rival tribe to pieces was its ability to do so. The God of the Bible was invented to serve those times. In fact, Exodus states this plainly: the Lord is a man of war.
Before I explain, however, the God of the Bible is neither male nor female. God transcends gender. What I'm talking about here is why God is depicted in male terms in the Bible. The Bible depicts God in masculine terms because, 1, the Hebrew Bible's primary concern is making a good world. 2, a good world can only be achieved by making good people. And 3, the people who commit nearly all the world's violence are males. Therefore, it is in both men's and women's interests to depict God in the masculine. Here's why. Without a father or some other male rule giver, young men are likely to do great harm. If there is no male authority figure to give a growing boy rules, it is very difficult for him to control his wilder impulses.
Prager is partly correct here. Across the world's supernatural beings, alpha male gods were invented in an effort to establish order, particularly among men. The God of the Bible is no exception. Submitting to the alpha male is an ancient evolutionary impulse that reflects our long history as social primates living in dominance hierarchies. We see something similar in the robust chimpanzee. If there's an exceptionally powerful alpha male, Lesser males keep the peace because they fear the violent costs of challenging his position. This dynamic is played out geopolitically, where authoritarian leaders use fear and violence to control the men beneath them. And when those despots are deposed, chaos and violence ensues. This is surely why the God of the Bible is described as being so incredibly violent. In the Bible, he's directly described as having killed nearly 2.5 million people. And in Numbers, nearly 15,000 for complaining about his killing. In a moment, we'll get into some specific examples of how the biblical God's maleness creates its tribalistic morality designed for violence against one's neighbor.
As President Barack Obama told an audience in 2008, children who grow up without a father are 5 times more likely to live in poverty and commit crime, 9 times more likely to drop out of school, and 20 times more likely to end up in prison. Commenting on that speech, Dr. Alvin Poussant, a psychiatrist with Harvard Medical School, confirmed these statistics. The absence of fathers corresponds with a host of social ills, including dropping out of school and serving time in jail.
There is an obvious and crucial role for fathers in society. A father's ability to give love, guidance, protection, and provisioning is vital for societal health. But this role is not dependent on a dominant rule-making God, and Prager's claim is a convenient oversimplification of a very complex process. A closer look at the data implicates economics. Unwed mothers often do not have the benefit of a spouse's income, which makes them more vulnerable to poverty, living in bad neighborhoods, with few opportunities for advancement, social pressures that actually trigger sons to take alternate strategies, such as crime, to attain resources, to attain status, and even mates. The fact is that nations like Denmark, Sweden, Norway are among the highest for unwed mothers. And they're also among the safest countries in the whole world. With the lowest rates of crime. Why is that? Partly because these nations provide the best social services for women, paid maternity leave, childcare services, not to mention free college education, that not only keep single mothers out of poverty, but provide their sons a path to eventually provide for their own families and to contribute to society. And it's no coincidence that those countries also tend to be the least religious. To understand this connection, let's consider a lesson from biology. Male mammals compete for reproduction, and one way is by guarding their mates to ensure that their genes, and not their competitors, make it to the next generation. Now, because scripture is almost universally written by male primates, it tends to privilege male reproductive interests and codify mate guarding. The result is rules that keep women financially dependent on men, affording men greater ability to mate guard. This is why in the most religious societies we have the least amount of the social services that I just mentioned, and women's right to own property or inherit money, to work, to drive, or even leave the home unchaperoned are highly restricted. All of this actually creates the conditions for greater violence among males born to unwed mothers because those laws ensure a difficult, if not impossible, financial situations for unwed mothers and their sons.
In other words, if one's primary goal is a good world, a God depicted in masculine terms, a Father in heaven, must be the source of moral commands such as do not murder and do not steal.
According to Prager, not only does the biblical God attempt to discourage murder, child abuse, theft, and rape, but his masculinity aids in that endeavor.
Let's start with God's commandment that thou shalt not kill. On the face of it, this is morally intuitive and sensible, but it really means thou shalt not kill members of your in-group. Murdering others was fair game. Remember that the first thing that Moses did when he descended from Mount Sinai, bearing those freshly engraved stone tablets, was to order his men to slaughter 3,000 members of the rival tribe, men, women, and children, for having the wrong religion. The same goes with thou shalt not steal. This was meant for the in-group only. In the Bible, stealing from outsiders was encouraged by God. Even if it meant slaughtering the victims. As one example among so many, consider what Joshua did at God's command in Jericho. They utterly destroyed all in the city, both men and women, young and old, oxen, sheep, and asses, with the edge of the sword. And they burned down the city with fire, and all within it. Only the silver and gold and the vessels of bronze and iron they put into the treasury of the house of the Lord. How about rape? The Bible does not forbid rape. It's not one of the 10 Commandments. This is also related to male mate competition. Chimpanzees, for example, will form all-male raiding parties who patrol the boundaries of their territory, systematically kill lone males or smaller parties, and eventually take over the troops' females and territory. Hunter-gatherers have been documented conducting similar raids. It may shock you to know that the God of the Bible, based as he is on a dominant male primate with biological needs to compete for females, not only condones rape, but commands mass rape, along with infanticide, against the rival tribe. In Numbers it says, "Now therefore kill every male among the little ones, and kill every woman who has known a man lying with him, but all the young girls who have not known man lying with him, keep alive for yourselves." The biblical God hardly commanded a world of kindness, peace, and justice. The thing is, we are moving towards a more globally interconnected community of nations. Bound by economies, cultures, and technology.
If the father figure / rule giver that boys need is not on earth, a morally authoritative masculine God can serve as an effective substitute. Any discomfort you might feel with the masculine depiction of God is not comparable to the pain we will all feel if boys are not civilized into good men. To transform a wild boy into a good man, a male role model is as necessary as a male rule giver. So when the Bible depicts God as merciful, compassionate, and caring for the poor and the widow, it is not so much interested in describing God as in providing a model for humans, especially males, to emulate.
Now, I'm sure there's some people out there who think the New Testament is exempt from the male brutality and oppression we've discussed so far, and that it only exemplifies God's mercy and love. The God of the New Testament still appears to be the dominant alpha male he's always been, just with more refined means of control. Dr. Garcia can explain.
We can find the violent, sexually controlling alpha male ethos in the God of the New Testament as well. For example, both Paul and Mark warn that any city that doesn't receive the followers of Christ will be destroyed in a manner even more savage than that of Sodom and Gomorrah. And in Corinthians, women are commanded by Paul to be silent in church and to obey men. It is a shame for women to speak in church. And per Paul, Jesus is even described as requiring virgins. Virgins are especially relevant to mortal male primates competing for expression in the gene pool because they come free from a rival's genes. But virgins should be irrelevant to an omnipotent being who doesn't need to perpetuate himself by biological means.
If God were depicted as female, young men would deem traits such as compassion, mercy, and care for the downtrodden as feminine and would not identify with them. But if God, their Father in heaven, who is strong, on occasion even a warrior, cares for the poor and loves justice, mercy, and kindness, then these traits are also masculine and to be emulated. The argument that girls equally need female role models to avoid violence is objectively not true, because the problem of mayhem and violence is overwhelmingly a male one. Of course, girls need female role models, but not to avoid violence. And, like boys, girls are more likely to obey a male authority figure. A report released by the Minnesota Psychological Association concluded, in a study of female inmates, more than half came from a father-absent home.
Positive male role models are important, but criminality, even when correlated to the lack of a father figure, isn't necessarily caused by a simple lack of a male rule giver. When we steer toward equal rights and evidence-based political and economic policies, we all do better.
It is therefore ironic that some women are attempting to render the God of Western religious morality less masculine, because if their goal is achieved, it is women who will suffer most from lawless males.
The most religious societies are typically where violence against women is most tolerated. And this sacralized violence is driven by male reproductive imperatives. As one example, among so many, in Hosea, God orders the butchering of the pregnant women of Samaria, an ancient city that was considered to be one of God's wives, as punishment for adultery. Samaria shall become desolate, for she hath rebelled against her God. They shall fall by the sword. Their infants shall be dashed in pieces, and their women with child shall be ripped up. We must ask ourselves, is this the example we want for the men of our societies?
Thanks for watching. I've been Drew of Genetically Modified Skeptic.
And I've been Dr. Hector Garcia.
Dr. Garcia, where can people find you on social media?
You can reach me at hector-garcia.com. There's a means to contact me on my website, and my Twitter handle is at Dr. H.A. Garcia.
Remember to subscribe, check out my Patreon, follow me on Twitter and Facebook at GM Skeptic, join my Discord, and until next time, stay skeptical.